Hello everyone, this is Jamarl Thomas and welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, Justice Democrats. I wanted to do a follow-up story on this. So, just for anybody who doesn't know, Justice Democrats has to do with the organization that Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks set up to primary corporate Democrats. Essentially, the goal is to get more progressives in Congress. All throughout the country. I mean, they're just looking for regular people for the most part. They have an amazing platform, and like I said, I love the idea. So, I came across a woman today. Her name is Debbie. Get her last name. She's on a channel called The Sane Progressive. She is fierce. She's absolutely ferocious. I love her. And so, she had an interesting take on it. I'll let her explain it.
Hi everybody, this is Debbie with the Sane Progressive. Today I want to talk strategy. Right now, the country is still very much reeling from the ugliness of the 2016 presidential election. Many people in a place of highly reactive fear around the Donald Trump presidency, and people want to do something. And right now it's important we have a conversation about what is the best way to move forward to create true political change.
I'm going to play the
and move outside this
3 minutes.
duopoly of a Democratic and Republican party system where both of these entities are now governing in ways that are representing the interests of the corporate state and the military-industrial complex over the American people. So how do you have an effective people's movement? How do you create true political change? Well, I think maybe not doing the same things that haven't worked over and over and over again for decades. Recently, Cenk of the Young Turks and Kyle over at Secular Talk have put forth a plan to retake the Democratic Party from within and, vote in real progressives so that we can get, progressive policy. And it sounds great. This strategy it goes back decades, right back to the Jesse Jackson campaign. What invariably happens every single time is the Democratic Party establishment co-ops these movements, and the situation has continually deteriorated. Progressive Democrats of America have attempted this strategy. Many groups and individuals have worked within this premise, and it's an utterly failed strategy. Myself, I really do believe that we need to be breaking out of outmoded political thought and seeking to change the entire way that we address this problem, especially not moving in the same ways that haven't worked before. I looked at the platform that was put up by Secular Talk and the Turks, and okay, let's break it down. Kyle Kozlinski and Cenk Uygur. It's time to face the facts. The Democratic Party is broken and the corporate establishment wing of the party is responsible. Okay, in the first sentence, they're lost. All right, no, it's not the establishment corporate Democrats. That is why we are where we are today. We, the American people and the Democratic constituents, have been codependent enablers to the corruption of the Democratic Party. We have failed to practice basic citizen oversight. We have watched as they again and again and again and again and again cross lines too dear to cross, and then we always are rationalizing why we have to stay with politicians who are betraying our most core interests out of a fear of something worse. And we've done it for so long that now you can't recognize the Democrats from the Republicans.
She's right. She's absolutely right. I came across this conclusion, I think it was a while back actually, as Donald Trump came up, and I started thinking about to myself, how the hell did we end up in this situation? And I realized that as Democrats shifted to the right, and Bill Clinton came up with this idea of, well, yeah, we can take all this money and we can do these right-wing policies, because where's the left going to go? We're their best bet. We can be the least worst, and we'll get their vote just because we're not as batshit crazy as the other guys. And each time, you still vote for them. And every time you vote for them, they slide a little bit further to the right. At some point, I kept posing the question to people. I said, so what happens if you elect Hillary Clinton and she privatizes Social Security, Medicare, and invades Syria? Are you going to vote for her again in 2020? I never got an answer to that question, because they knew the answer to that question was yes. But it says how ridiculous that strategy is. You would continuously vote for somebody who's purely just because they're not somebody else, almost completely forgetting the fact that that person is still going to be doing some presidenting, will still be operating within that office. Yeah, she's completely right on that point. On the second point, whether or not, so she's making this case that, look, they've tried this before, and that because they've tried this before, we need to do something else. We need to get outside of this party strategy, or this duopoly. And again, she's right, but I don't think she goes far enough. It's a fish in water. I keep saying that, and I can't think of a better analogy. Even if let's take her strategy to utopian outcome. She starts another party, and let's say the party does a hell of a lot better than the Greens, and her party to some degree captures power. Now she's still going to have to go through the same electoral system of Democrats and Republicans, and even if she manages to get through that system, her party is just as susceptible to being bought off as any other party. The problem is the incentive structure. It's not so much the party. Yes, if you got money out of politics, that's great, but there's still that incentive structure of capitalism. The problem is capitalism. In every situation, the capitalistic model allows, it's built within it to try to get rid of the obstruction. If that obstruction is her new party, they're going to try to get rid of that new party. If her obstruction is the new party and they can't get rid of it, maybe they'll try to buy the guys off. If they can't buy the guys off, maybe they'll find ways to gum up the works in regards to regulation. It's the system itself. It creates these private entities that have no association at all with the whole. Sometimes they're multinational corporations where they don't have any particular home base. Sometimes they are maybe an American company, but their goal is profit. Their goal is not whatever happens to the rest of the country. So if it's in their best interest to undermine democracy, they're going to undermine democracy. If it's in their best interest to buy off a politician, they're going to buy off a politician. Why wouldn't they? It's a capitalistic system. The goal is to get as much money as possible. They're machines that are designed to make profit. Well, what do you expect them to do? I mean, it's almost like we expect them to say, well, no, their values would kick in, and their morality would kick in to prevent them from making more cash. Come on. Come on. Look, if they're gonna make cash, they're gonna find ways to either cut the costs to produce something, cut the costs of workers, meaning get rid of workers, either automate that process, either get new technology to make that process more streamlined. Whether that's passing laws maybe to prevent minimum wage, maybe passing laws to allow certain pollution, maybe allow or gut environmental laws, like what they're doing with the EPA right now. Elements within the society of the capitalistic system function on their own accord. The society itself doesn't really matter. It doesn't factor into it in as much as they can make their profits. For the most part, they would like to privatize all the gains and socialize all of the issues. So I'm skeptical that creating another party. Look, in the short term, she's right. It probably would make a difference. But think of the New Deal. FDR made a hell of a difference. I mean, he put his stamp so sternly in history that 60 years later, they're still grappling and undoing elements of the New Deal. But they are undoing elements of the New Deal. I mean, it's for the most part gone. It's torn to shreds. It took them a long time, but they did it. That's my point. It's built within the system itself to unravel those things, any impediment to cash. It is hard to maintain a democracy within a capitalist system. It tends to oligarchy. You're going to get concentrations of wealth in one end. We keep pretending as if there are three classes in society. There's not. There's just two. There's this super rich and there's everybody else. So, I feel it though. I think basically she is right though. This duopoly forces you into a situation where one party can be batshit crazy, the other party can just be sane, and because that party looks sane, you almost feel blackmailed into voting for the same party, even though the things that they're saying are still against your value system just as much as the other guys. It behooves us to just say no. I mean, regardless of who's going to be on the other end of that, if the Democratic Party is going to behave in a certain way, they should not get your support. And giving them your support allows them to move further to the right. It's what's happened over the past 20, 30 years. She's right. Look, the basics of her argument boils down to the platform is nice, but if you can't get those people in office, then your platform doesn't matter. She's saying that it's been tried before. And because it's been tried before, you end up in a situation where the system itself blocks those people from the process. So, and she was making the case in regards to Bernie Sanders, essentially saying, look what happened to him during the primaries. That system itself was throwing people off the rolls. They were essentially blatantly cheating. But nobody said anything about it, including Sanders himself. And so she has a good point. I mean, she does have a decent point, and I agree. I remember watching the primary saying to myself, Democrats are doing things that they typically complain about Republicans. That was the way it felt. They stole Nevada outright, and then in addition to stealing Nevada, covered it up by saying Sanders supporters were throwing chairs. Yeah, they weren't throwing chairs, they were mad that you stole Nevada. Throwing people off the rolls in Brooklyn, closing down polls, literally putting Deborah Wasserman-Schultz, who ran with Hillary Clinton on the previous run, her failed run, in his DNC chair. They were passing stories, they were doing all sorts of underhanded stuff. So she's right. But I don't think that means you can't do both. I mean, you can educate the public in the sense of saying, look, we do not have a functioning democracy within our electoral system. We need to fix that. We need to shore that up. You can do that and still primary these corporate Democrats. I would make the case that you probably do need to do both. Yeah, I would make the case you need to do both. Also, there is a difference between, when Jesse Jackson did it versus now. In fact, there's a big difference between the two things. One is technology. We're at the point where there is a web of people, for the most part, that have been joined together through social media. I have not met a ton of people, but at the same token, I know that there are a ton of people out there that think like me. And that when voting comes around, when certain social events comes around, there is a unanimous kind of pull to it. Technology. That's a big difference. I mean, what was the technology during that time? Television? Progressives was not going to get on television. I mean, at the end of the day, they could essentially exclude whoever they wanted to exclude if they didn't like what the person was saying. You can't do that now. Independent media is ferocious. And when you're talking about people from the age of let's say under 40, they're not watching the main television. So getting that story out, going after these guys, you can do it. It's absolutely doable. I don't think it's necessarily impossible. The voting part, yeah, I do think that's an issue, and I do think that's something that would have to be called out. But it doesn't mean you can't do both at the same time. And you got to do something. And if you just stand aside, the last thing, the only thing that's going to happen if you stand aside is that one of those corporate Democrats is probably going to take the reins again. They may or may not win, but it puts you back in the exact same situation you were in with Hillary Clinton in office. Personally, I do think the chances are good for a backlash. And I think the chances are good for a backlash in a way that if you can either kneecap the main corporate Democrats and scare the shit out the rest, you can pull in a particular way. I don't necessarily think it's so hopeless to change the party, but you have to win. Like, it's not a situation where you can bargain with them. You can't bargain with them. You have to win. You have to win the argument, meaning those guys need to go home. If this is a vehicle for allowing that conversation, to allowing that argument, and again, putting a focus on the voting thing also at the same time, then yeah, they should do it. I love that idea. Same progressive, don't be so down on it. It actually may work. Alright guys, thank you.